Well, I'm Jonathan Worsley, and on this FHS podcast, I'm delighted to have the founder and CEO of Quo Global, David Keane. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jonathan, and it's a privilege. And our friendship is extensive, and our work together is extensive, and it's a real joy to be here. Thanks,
David. Listen, I was just looking at your CV. 90 esteemed professionals around the globe now. You launched in 1996 in Bangkok. You're branding not only nations, destinations, but the hospitality giants, airlines, funky design hotels, travel companies, boutiques. And I love this element of your CV. Quo brings ideas to life. Just explain that a little bit.
Yeah, we as an agency have always thought differently. We've always believed that sourcing vision and identifying vision within an organization and bringing that to life through a strong creative process, but particularly focusing on culture. And as the agency's grown, particularly over the last 10 years or so, we have identified and reasoned a source of branding to be that of the creation of culture. And if I tell a very short story, which talks to your question, where if you imagine a village anywhere in the world and you define that village and you look at the walls of that village and the people in the village and the architecture of the village and the schools in the village and the food in the village, in every village that you come across, and the village is obviously a metaphor for a brand or for a concept, every village that you come across is unique in its own form. The food is unique, the way people speak is unique. And we as an agency focus on that village, we focus on that metaphor, and we craft defined ideas, distinguished ideas around the definition of whether it's the architecture, whether it's the people, whether it's the food, whatever it is about the concept. And the ideas that we craft are, we believe, in most cases certainly unique to the village and distinguish that village or that brand from being apart from any others.
So do all your clients have villages, or do you try to extract that from them? In other words, do companies all have cultures? And in some cases, do you try to bring that to life through what you do?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the metaphor works completely. I often describe it as, if it's a small noodle shop on a corner, or a destination, or a country, or a big organization, they all have their own cultures. And that culture, the unique thing, and it's not a word I love, but in this case, it's the best word to describe it. The unique thing about the culture is we can define it. When we identify a brand as a culture and form that culture, and you can place that within Quo. We could put that within the bench or within FHS itself. The culture of the show or of my company or of anything else is precise to us, and our goal and our vision and our methodology works to define that, to bring it to life, and then bring it to life in different types of experience.
So explain to me the development of your brand as well. So Quo, why Quo?
Well, the short answer as to why Quo was we had a client about 15 years ago. My company was originally called Keane, and as good of a name as that is, I didn't really want to have the name Keane on the door of the company, and wanted to change it. And we had shared the naming for a new then lifestyle brand. I think it was in 2009 to a group of hotels in Thailand. And the first name, the name that we were promoting was Quo for a lifestyle brand. And the owner of the hotel group if you pronounce Quo in Thai, it's Quo, Quo. And that means a male cow, bull. And she didn't like the name Quo for the name of her brand. But I loved the name Quo, and I was in the process of renaming the company. And we took it. So that's where the name Quo comes from. Quo comes from status quo, so where you are. And it has served it. We don't, as we are as entrepreneurs, we don't always make good decisions, but that was a really good.
Yeah, I like it a lot, David. So tell me a little bit about, that some of the growth in your business, because it represents the industry as well, doesn't it? We both work in developing markets, which can be rather dramatic and volatile, with both the challenges and the opportunities. But you've certainly been growing in some of these opportunistic markets. Tell us about your reasons for going into some of these markets and the growth thereof.
I think it actually started before I started the business in '96 in Bangkok. In 1991, I was very grateful and very fortunate to go to Bhutan for the first time. And Bhutan was really then, it was barely open. I think, if my memory is correct, there were 1,974 tourists in 1990 that had visited. So it was, but they wanted to develop tourism. They had the tariffs that they'd formed to try and limit the amount of tourism because of the environmental impact. They feared for the country from large scale tourism. And I worked in Bhutan. I was blessed and very lucky to go there 4 or 5 times a year for at least 10 years. So through the creation of Quo, where I worked with the tourism department on the definition of how Bhutan unfolded to the world. And obviously since COVID, it's gotten better, but I think in 2019, they had certainly well over 100,000 tourists. And the country is challenged by those numbers. And there were decisions that were made in the 1990s that impacted. Throughout my career and throughout Quo's career, we've gone into developing markets, whether that's in Sri Lanka or particularly in the Maldives, where we were invited to create a brand, the first independent hotel brand or resort brand, where there was, Hilton was there, Four Seasons was there. There was some homegrown brands, but there was no specific individual hospitality resort brand which was garnering the kinds of rates that the bigger brands were. And we went in there and we created Huvafen Fushi, which became the darling for the glitterati and won huge awards. It was the first underwater spa, the first underwater wine cellar, underground wine cellar, very funky overwater rooms. And it was the catalyst. They garnered over $1,000 room nights for the first time in the Maldives, which of course now are normal. But at that time, to get an ADR of over $1,000 was gigantic. And it garnered, or was the catalyst of massive change in the Maldives. So in terms of volatility, in terms of watching destinations grow and the challenges that they go through while they're growing, is, I guess, a specialist. And as you know, 4 years ago, or around the beginning of COVID, or late in the first year of COVID, we were invited to Riyadh to work on then simultaneously 2 or 3 projects, both of them at a governmental level, let's say, both of them very significant in the evolution of tourism infrastructure in the kingdom. And it's been a privilege. And, I think it would be fair to say for all of us, something of a challenge as well. But we're all so incredibly passionate about the future of tourism in Saudi Arabia. We together, we know, I mean, you and I have driven around the country fairly extensively. We know the opportunity that the country brings, but it's inevitable that there's going to be roadblocks along the way. It's inevitable there's going to be challenges along the way. It's inevitable there's going to be struggles or not struggles, but challenges between the public and private sectors as they develop the giga projects and then the private sector develop relatively smaller projects. And as the partner, as a key partner when we're creating the culture or the brand of an entity, inevitably as our partner, as our client or our partner goes through changes, at the same time we have to react to those changes. And my strategy has been and has grown to be, as volatility increases, it's critical for Quo to de-risk. So we de-risk from critical clients. We de-risk also from different parts of the kingdom in this case, or from different countries, so that we don't, to use an old phrase, we don't have all of our eggs in one basket.
Well, that makes a great deal of sense. And David, you've just recently opened up an office in London as well, I gather.
Correct. So under the stewardship of David Anderson, we now have 4 people, as of today. We just had a social media social media director in London, and we have 2 great strategists. London for us is brilliant because of the amazing talent that London brings to the table, whether that's in design or in strategy or in content. London is still, for me, probably the greatest source of fabulous talent.
Well, David, that obviously all makes sense. Having a strategy for these different markets, but how would you say that the brand world has changed since you started Quo back in 1996 in Bangkok, in our industry, in the hospitality industry?
That's a fantastic question, and I think it's funny because I was having dinner last night here in Amsterdam with one of the leaders of the wellness industry, one of the biggest brands and the leader of wellness. And we were talking about this somewhat sort of anachronistic growth pattern within the hospitality industry. And as you know, it's something that I talk about a lot. I think that from the 1980s or even before, the growth of the bigger brands, especially under their motherships or under the parent company, have not altogether been a catalyst for the definition of experience through the brand. So if one imagines a Marriott or a Hilton or an Intercontinental hotel, one immediately conjures a architectural experience, and it may be a really nice architectural experience, but one doesn't necessarily conjure a human experience. One doesn't necessarily recall the meetings one's had when engaging with particularly the very large brands. But with the advent, and I think, when Citizen M came to the fore in 2008, it was that definition of lifestyle and focus on humanity and focus on human connection, where when one walked into a Citizen M, you were greeted in totally different, completely friendly way without a reception desk as a friend rather than as a client. And I think that in as human connection becomes increasingly more important or increasingly more prevalent within the industry as something that defines the experience, the guest experience, and becomes more ubiquitous as it has, whether it's at Hoxton or Mama Shelter or Jazz in the City or whatever, Urban Loft. There's a ton of brands that are doing it. When that becomes ubiquitous, and I don't think it's reached that tipping point yet, but when it does become ubiquitous, the joy of the hospitality industry should, in my opinion, flourish more than it is. I think it's moving away from the product to the guest to that experience and to that connection.
And that's what, of course, what consumers are looking for as well. Don't you also think that the competitive nature of destinations in terms of tourism and infrastructure as well has really also expanded the envelope? So you look at what Saudi, of course, is doing and Dubai has done, and now you see Ras Al Khaimah, you see Oman, you see India with a fabulous tourism infrastructure that it's built. Obviously, it needs more hotel rooms, which I'm sure will come online soon. But it seems to me that the destinations as well have really picked up the importance of tourism as an impact for their economy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it goes without saying. And as you know, I spend a lot of my time in Thailand, where the importance of the tourist dollar or revenue from the tourism industry is fundamental to the future of the economy of Thailand. I think it's possibly less so in India. Obviously, in the Maldives, it's absolutely front and center and totally critical. I think that there's very often, and maybe I'm going to be a bit contentious, but there's very often a disconnect between the private and public sectors in this area, where the public sector is ostensibly not ignoring, but is ostensibly looking to drive infrastructure to drive greater tourism, particularly in these over-tourist, in these spaces which suffer from over-tourism. Where the private sector, the entrepreneurial parts of the private sector, the entrepreneurial segments of the private sector, is engaging in a far more competitive economy where they have to distinguish themselves in order to drive success. I do think, as I said, I'm sitting in Amsterdam. I think what the Amsterdam Council, the Amsterdam local government has done in terms of restricting growth in hotels in Amsterdam, I believe they announced it last year, is an immense statement where the public sector is not just going for more, but saying enough. The tourism infrastructure is harming the culture, it's harming the environment, it's harming the architecture, and we need to take a breath. We need to wait, and we need to stop.
So do you think that's an answer for over-tourism?
I think it's an answer, yes. I don't think it's necessarily the answer. And I think, again, I don't want to get political, but it's that disconnect between the public and private sectors. Yeah, I think the Uber tourism is it's a bit of a plague, because where you walk around and there's swarms of tourists in a beautiful place in St. Mark's Square, or here in Dam Square in Amsterdam, or in Paris, the glory of the city, the glory of the culture is undermined. And I don't think it helped. In the longer term, environmentally, sustainably, it doesn't help tourism.
No, exactly. Well, I suppose it gives more opportunity for some of these developing markets as well, as they grow their tourism.
But I was just in the Maldives a few weeks ago, and to be honest, I was shocked. It was off season. I came out of the airport, and it was packed. Immigration was packed, going in and going out. It took ages. It was bursting at the seams. And I've been involved in the Maldives for 20 years, and I know the place super well. And my immediate perception of what is the Maldives, which is ingrained in me because I've been going there forever, or for 20 years, suddenly changed when I came out. I'm like, this is different. And it's driven by the government. It was driven by the initiative in the government in 2011, 2012 to create volume and to lose the moniker of the world's most glamorous place for couples, to becoming a volume destination. And, and I'm not sure if I'm happy about it, but they've succeeded. And now there are multiple new islands being reclaimed, being built, and the perception of the Maldives as a country has changed.
This is also interesting, David. You're talking about how this whole brand world has changed over time. The evolution of experiences is one big thing. But if you were to mentor your younger self, is there anything else you would have done differently?
I've loved the journey, and my team loved the journey. We're engaged in the avant-garde. We're with many of our clients, we're engaged in defining the avant-garde, in trying to figure out what the future is and figuring out that tapestry or figuring out that painting. I certainly didn't set out 28 years ago to do this. I've learned as I go, and I think we've shared this before. We continue to learn. I learn more now and realize more about how we can hone that culture, hone that experience, hone that definition. I know more now than I did 2 years ago. I continue to learn. I think it's absolutely phenomenal to see the younger generation engaging now and realizing that brand and the definition of a concept or an experience or a culture or whatever it is actually fundamental to the future, to the economic, social success of any kind of project. So, yeah, when you ask the question, I think, well, could I have done this sooner? We kind of have to work in symbiosis with what's going on in the world and how the consumer's changing, how destinations are changing, politics are impacting. It's interesting. I would think from a Quo point of view, we know more, we see more of what we can do today than we probably did 5 years, certainly before COVID. I've loved it. Honestly, professionally, I've loved this journey. Someone says, would you like to have done something else? Truly not, I'm blessed to have realized that. I often tell a story, and I'll tell it very quickly. When I was in Hong Kong in 1989, 1990, when I first came to Asia, I was standing on a street corner after an interview, and I knew I hadn't got the job that I'd been interviewed for. And I said to myself, what do you want to do with your life? What's going to make you happy? You're blessed with being fairly bright, and you can earn money. And I wasn't particularly worried about earning money, even though probably I should have been more. I don't know. And I said, no, I want to do something creative. And it is that creative spirit that I've worked on personally my whole life to drive that joy. And when you look at AI and you look at everything that's happening now, the difference is creativity. And I had an epiphany when I was in my 20s, and I realized that. And I've worked on that my whole life. And that's, if there's a message to younger people coming into the hospitality industry or into any industry, any service industry, work on your creativity, because that's what's going to make the difference.
That's great, David. And you're just picking up on that creativity theme at the moment and looking at painting that picture in 2 years' time. how is that picture going to look when we bring in generative AI and tools, technology tools that will probably reshape your business to some extent?
I think it enhances it. I mean, I think it's the balance of what AI can bring. We're looking at a tool at the moment called Perplexity, which you probably you may have looked at, which I'm using. But there's also some AI branded tools that now are going to be out in the market and people can use. They can't bring that gold. They're not. They probably will be able to in 10 years' time, 5-10 years' time, but I don't think it's soon. So that color, that gold, that painting that has that nuance, that definition, that human understanding, that is, it's the combo of the human understanding and the definition of the lines on the painting, the colors that we use, the experiences that we imagine, the aromas that we form, the music that is sounded, the voice that is made. It's that combo, it's that complexity of definition that we can use AI as a base, and it'll help us and it'll accelerate. But I actually think it'll help us and it'll make what we deliver in the end far deeper and far more meaningful. I hope. I mean, if AI develops to the form that certainly younger people are saying, we'll all be challenged. It'll take over. It'll define. And while we are still the architects, we're still the conductors of the definition, we're fine. And when AI overtakes that and becomes the architect or the conductor or the composer.
Now, David, you advised us on our new branding, Future Hospitality Summit, FHS. And I can't thank you enough for what you and your son, Paul, have done to help us with our whole branding. But what does FHS mean to you?
FHS, what you've created, not just through your collective experience from HIF through to AA, through to what's now become FHS, it's quite similar to the journey. Well, not similar, but it's a journey, right? I mean, you've been on your own definition of journey, and what you have created, or you and your team have incredibly created at FHS, is this expectation, which we're now in that period, a few weeks away from Dubai, from FHS World, that expectation of what's going, it's become not just a place to meet, it's become an indispensable event where you're marrying the needs of different people, opportunities for learning, obviously the Sustainable Hospitality Challenge, which adds not just the functional stories that it tells, but the message that it sends and brings in our youth and the younger people. You've created this point in the calendar where it's those days, and I'm not trying to blow smoke, but those days are FHS. They're not a date. They're not dates. They're an essential medium, an essential few days that, as we talked about when we were creating the branding, so there's the expectation, there's the event, and then there's the post-event, the consequences. There's the pre-event, the event itself, and the consequences of the event. There's not many conferences, most conferences, and I won't name them, but most conferences, you either go to learn or to meet. What you've brilliantly created is an opportunity, an expectation before the event of that kind of combination of learning and meeting and having fun. So it's very cool.
I like it. Thank you. Well, David, thank you so much for your support and taking us on this journey post-COVID. You're on a couple of sessions actually, we got you really busy this year. I was looking through the program.
I know.
Oh my goodness. We've got you speaking with Maria from NEOM, Javier from the president of EMEA for Hyatt on reimagining hospitality. So that and that's all to do with Saudi Vision 2030. So that's really cool. You're on a workshop. So David, are you charging for this workshop, forming culture to build brands, as you've been discussing on this podcast here? I hope you're charging for that, because I mean, there's a lot of expertise that you're going to provide in that 1 hour workshop.
We're not. We're indirectly charging.
Very good. Very good. And then you're on Wednesday afternoon. Fantastic. You're with Emirates Academy on the leadership series with some 200 students that we normally have from a number of educational establishments. So thank you for participating in that and showcasing what a great industry this is to the youth.
I've been mentoring the different teams for the challenge, for the Sustainable Hospitality Challenge. That joy, you and I have been doing this for many years, right? I mean, we've been since we became good friends, we've been mentoring and helping younger people in different forms. I can't measure the joy that I gain from that. It's absolutely, it's such fun. 2, it's always learning. And 3, the joy that I have at the end of those calls. Super. Very happy to do that.
Well, that's
for myself, selfishly. I like it, and hopefully I can be of a little bit of help.
Well, that's right. We got some fabulous schools from around the world who are participating on that challenge on the Monday, 30th of September. So that's going to be great. So David, listen, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. It's been absolutely wonderful to catch up with you. We didn't even get to speak about our travels in Saudi, which we do every year after FHS Saudi. But I look forward to designing where we're going to be going next year with you soon. But David, thank you so much for joining us.
Jonathan, thank you so much, and best of luck for the show.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.